how do I represent, how do I empower, how do I resist without being like, falling short into tapping into stereotypes or, perpetrating myths that are like negative stereotypes of things, like how do I resist, how do I empower through that, and I think that's what we're really kind of, at least from my perspective, like I find that a lot of the Chicano people, we're very resilient to things. I mean, we sort of like can tap into things and you give us and throw things at us and we're like, yeah, okay, we'll take it back. We do a ninja spin, and like reflect it and yeah, okay, but so what? And then we'll bring it, we'll reshape it, And so to me, all of that is who we are. My name is Karla Diaz and I'm an artist and a writer. And I like to say I'm a storyteller. My work really is about storytelling and encompassing that filtered through the Mexican American experience of both living and growing up in Los Angeles and in Mexico. I went to school in elementary school in Mexico, and then I repeated the last year of elementary school here in the United States. I went to school at Hollenbeck Junior High School in East LA, and then I went to high school on the west side of LA in a school called Hamilton High School. And then from there, I graduated and I went to get my BA at Cal State LA. And I got my Master's of Fine Arts at CalArts, California Institute of the Arts. But then later on in school, of course, I wanted to sort of, tap into that more, right? And so I was like, oh, I'm going to be part of, the organization of, that embraces a community of Chicanos, and I want to be part of that. And I think we were talking earlier about that when I went to, first I started, they had the Mecha groups, right? The Mecha teams. And these were supposed to be like, I thought, a sort of like community space to be part of. And I was like, yay, awesome. We can talk more and we can learn more. And so I got invited to one of the Mecha meetings. And it was like, they kicked me out because I proposed that we change like some of the uniform colors and things. And I was like, oh, shoot, like this is not going to work, right? So, I was like, they were very hardcore in terms of like, I mean, I respect where they're coming from in some ways in terms of their activism and things. But for me, it was too much. Like, I'm a creative person. So I'm all like, let's rethink, right? Let's work together. And so they kicked me out of that, So I was kicked out of Metro and I was like, oh man, I guess I got to go start my own group, And, but of course I would come up with that. I'm like, ooh, let's have some more color in that, And they were like, oh, Karla, like, what the hell? This is what we're trying to do. These are our colors, brown. And I'd be like, ooh, bright pink, I guess I can define my work in terms of, that's a great question. I can define it in terms of many different aspects, not just in terms of, the genre, like if I'm working on as painting or drawing, I define it within that, like the genre that I'm working in, but I'm also defining it in terms of, being a Mexican American artist and a contemporary artist at that. I mean, I don't sit there like when I do my work and I'm like, I'm doing like Chicana work, I'm doing Mexican American work. I try to focus on, what is the story that I want to tell and how can I tell it the best way that I can? And what are those genres that I want to use, in terms of the art mediums or genres that I want to choose to do that. But I know that in terms of contextualizing my work, I do, I'm tapping into iconography, I tap into associations, I'm tapping into language, I'm tapping into histories, I'm tapping into experiences that are about growing up as a Mexican American woman, girl, right? And having this kind of interesting immigrant experience of like being an immigrant where I'm born a U.S. citizen, And so I think when I think about in reaching out and tapping into my work as a whole, I filtered it through that. But but I'm at the bottom of it. I'm an artist and a storyteller. I work with, I think, many different artists and in a multidisciplinary perspective and practice. I've worked with poets like Gloria Alvarez. I've worked with, musicians. I've worked with a lot of performance people. And some of them, like, an artist, professional artist. I mean, I used to look and see the work of artists like Paul Botello, like because of his murals and intersection of that. I had never met him, but in terms of like being able to be inspired by his work. But like people like Gloria and we used to do readings together. Like we used to do poetry readings together. Some of the OSCO artists, and doing some of the performances with them. Like I actually got to work with some of them and do some of the performances live and read with them, and they were play like instruments, and so to me, like that kind of experience was really great because I not only was able to be in the same level or working in this space with them and be influenced by them. I have a lot of mentors in my life, even now, right? And all these amazing mentors that I've had throughout the years and different points in my life and different points in my career. But definitely, I think my grandfather was a great source of inspiration and mentorship for me. When I was a kid, my grandfather was an amazing maker. I mean, he built the home that we lived in. And so I always watched him and saw like his creative energy. I had, a lot of mentors like Manasar Gamboa, who was a poet and playwright, and he lived in what was called the Chavez Ravine area. And in my teens, he became a very prominent person in my life because it wasn't so much about the writing workshops themselves and kind of the instruction that he guided me on in terms of like developing my voice as a storyteller and my craft in writing. It wasn't so much about that. It was the stories that he told me and that we would chat about and kind of be able to think about and experience and go back and forth when he would pick me up all the way from East LA. So the workshop was in this community center called Homeland Cultural Center in Long Beach. So that kind of sort of informal mentorship, really helped me in terms of my trajectory of, influencing my work, especially, like when I do my kind of community work that I've done with Slanguage and this kind of outreach, right, that I've done and had experience in. But in terms of like more personal work and my drawings, I think, my grandfather, but also I used to read a lot of comic books when I was a kid, so that really kind of, I think, helped me and fueled this kind of space for imagination, and storytelling at a very young age. Slanguage is an artist-run organization, and now we call it kind of de facto art school that started in the community here in Wilmington, California. And it was started by myself and my husband, Mari Barra Jr., and a few other artists that at that time started the organization. But it was essentially going to be a space for us to work. The intentionality behind that is finding a studio space so that we can make work as artists, right? And then our first year, we operated on that idea, like, yes, we're artists, we're like making stuff, we're cleaning things, we're moving things around. But then we responded to an urgency in the community for young artists and to come in, and we saw them in that way, that kind of urgency and desire to have an art space and a space to create. But then it sort of have morphed and, transformed and grown, I like to say, in different stages, right? So from the beginning in that kind of artist studio lab space to what do we want to make, to how do we, keep making work, to developing an actual exhibition space where we gave a lot of different artists, some of their even like their first exhibitions, because there was a lot of artists amazing contemporary artists that they were like, museums were not looking at their work, or galleries, or for whatever reason, and we're like, hey, have a space here, let's show your work. Your work is important, right? Yes, I'm American, I am American. This is part of the American experience. Chicana culture is as valuable as any other kind of just, white experience, right? We are American. We are the heart of American,